Just give it a few minutes for everyone to join and then I'll start. I'll just give it another minute or so. I can see participants are joining now. Okay, well, I think I'll make a start. It's a couple of minutes past, but welcome everyone to the Skills Workshop, this virtual careers fair. For those of you with us before and followed the programme since June, welcome back. For anyone joining your first time, we're very welcome. It's good to see you. So my name is Catherine Dix and I am your host for tonight. I am joined by Will, Jessica and Bethan from Brunel Pension Partnership. My role at Brunel is now the Corporate Financial Controller, having recently moved from the Client Relations team. My journey to the investment industry started as a public sector accountant. Previously, I worked for the police and the fire service before joining the local government, where I became involved in the local government pension scheme. I thought I'd start by introducing Brunel, so I'm just going to share my screen, one moment. So I hope you can all see that. Some of you may have seen the session from LGPS Central. We are effectively a similar organisation, but working for the local government pensions fund in the Southwest. Back in July 2015, the government announced that in their budget statement, they would like to start consulting on how they could best pool the investments of the local government pension scheme. The objective was to reduce costs while maintaining overall investment performance. The result was that 8 regional investment pools were formed, Brunel covering the 10 Southwest local government pension schemes from its offices based in Bristol. Brunel Pension Partnership was founded in 2017 to manage the investments of our partner funds. We are owned by our 10 clients and offer investment portfolios covering equities, fixed incomes, property and private markets. We now have assets under management of over 20 billion, with a further 15 billion to be transitioned over the next 3 years. We may be small in size, but we are making an impact on the industry and have won numerous awards in respect of responsible investments. We also like to walk the talk when it comes to diversity. As at the 1st of April 2021, we had a staff number of 52, 28 of those female. We voluntarily publish our gender pay gap and offer staff opportunities to develop through corporate and individual training and development plans. Before moving on to our panelists, a quick reminder, this is a webinar. We can't see your faces, but please use the question and answer function to answer any questions. And I can see we've got a couple already, so really grateful for that. We will try to get through as many questions as possible. If I can now hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves and take you through their presentations. If I can start with Jessica, then move on to Will and then Bethan.
Hello, so I'm just going to share my screen now. There we go, hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, so I'm Jessica Davis. I'm 22 years old and I'm from South Wales. I studied actuarial science at the University of Essex and I graduated last summer. I've been at Brunel for 4 months now. I'm a portfolio analyst in the listed markets team. So what I do at Brunel, I support our portfolio managers with the analysis of the funds. The main part of that is monitoring the funds. So the starting point with the monitoring is creating an efficient process so that when the new data comes in every month, the data just flows into tables and graphs. That way I can see what needs to be looked at, such as if something's negatively impacting returns, and then I can go away and research why it's doing badly. Then we can ask fund managers about it in our next meeting, which I would also take notes on. I do other things throughout the month, like updating process documents. So how I got here. In school, I was good at maths and enjoyed statistical analysis, which is a bit weird. Yeah, I did. So I started looking at jobs to do with statistical analysis, and then I looked at degrees for those jobs. And then I looked at the universities where I could do that degree. So as I mentioned, I studied actuarial science, which was all about risk measurement. It was mainly mathematics with a little bit of economics and finance. I really enjoyed the degree, but I realised I didn't want to be an actuary, but I did want to utilise the degree that I just did for 3 years. So I realised it was the investment part of it that I really enjoyed, which is how I came to look at jobs that were statistical analysis within investment. So I started the job application process, which was challenging initially because there were so many websites and so many jobs and filtering through them all. And then because the graduate scheme applications were challenging, they were very hard, very long. You had to fill out the application, do the CV, do the cover letter, and then they would send me a literacy test, a numeracy test, a logical thinking test. And then I would do preparation for a video interview and maybe not hear back or receive an email that I wasn't going through to the next stage. And it got quite disheartening. And I lost a bit of motivation. And on top of that, it was kind of COVID lockdown. So I was applying for jobs for months and I hadn't got one that I wanted. So it is tricky. It was quite hard. The process of applying for a job was definitely the hardest, harder than the actual job. I did have a little few jobs before I found this one. I worked with my mum as a finance assistant, and then after that I had a 6-week contract as a financial evaluator, and then I worked as a supply teacher in local schools until I got this job. It is a temporary contract at Brunel, but even if I didn't get a permanent contract, I know that working here has massively increased my options when applying for jobs in the future. I do find that work experience is really important because I've learned what I'm good at, what I enjoy, and I had a lot more to talk about in interviews, just examples of time management and things like that. Going into this job, I only really thought about the numerical analysis. The quantitative analysis is what it's usually called, but I also enjoy the other side, the qualitative analysis. So which is what I really love about this job. I do a bit of both. So for example, with the monthly monitoring that I mentioned, sometimes I look at numerical analysis, so what's produced the negative returns, and then sometimes I'm looking at written articles, so researching why that area is doing badly. And I realise you don't have to be good at just one or the other, and you don't have to be good at both. So you don't really have to be good with maths and computers, and you don't have to be really good at making presentations. I think another thing before I started this job was that I was worried that I wouldn't know enough about certain areas, but no one expected me to. Everything was explained to me from the beginning, and I was given tasks to do and guided through them. I messaged Will a lot in my first few weeks, but he was really happy to help, and so was everyone else. I think everyone started somewhere, and everyone still has areas that they don't know much about. Sorry, I have a cold. But yeah, the best part was the learning, so it's all.
Thanks, Jess. So should we move on to Will? Will, do you want to start taking us through your presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jess. I didn't know most of that about you, to be honest, so that was really interesting. Just before I begin sharing my screen, because my first slide, and I will warn you that my slide is just a random assortment of pictures generally, but I've tried to keep it interesting. So just a brief introduction. My name's Will. I'm a senior portfolio analyst. I'm 27 years old. I've been at Brunel for around 3 years now. And yeah, it's a really enjoyable job, and I hope you get a sense of that through my presentation. So let me just share my screen very quickly. Can everyone see that? Is that okay? Cool. Right, so to begin with, who am I suppose? Now, I've used these two pictures for one reason mainly. I'm from a very, very rural area in the southwest of England, in Gloucestershire. Now, it's a beautiful part of the country. It's a small village called Langford, around 200 people. And yeah, that's where I grew up. Very, very small in comparison to Bristol, and not really the sort of area you'd expect someone to be inspired to work in high finance. So that's where I grew up. It's a small farming community generally. And when I was younger, I originally wanted to be, and this is just a stock image, I'm afraid, I don't know this person, but I originally wanted to be a lawyer. I have no idea why, and I think it's probably a good indication of how naive you can be when you're younger, when you think what a certain job will entail. I did do a law internship at one stage and realised within about probably 40 minutes that I didn't like it very much. But yeah, so that's just a bit about, I suppose, where I've come from and what I thought when I was really early on in my career, just starting out. So next slide. So what do I do at Brunel? I think Jess has given a really good introduction into how varied jobs can be in finance, and I just want to give you a demonstration of that here, really. So a large part of our job is investment analysis, as Jess has mentioned. That involves looking at screens like the bottom left one, which can look quite scary, but it is really interesting. I find it interesting, and to simplify our job somewhat, it basically involves making sure that our clients don't lose a lot of money and that they can afford to pay what are normal people good pensions. And that's how I think about our job, and that involves monitoring the investments we make, but also making good investments so that they can take advantage of market opportunities. Now, there is investment analysis that takes place on a monthly and quarterly basis that's, I suppose, planned, but also that involves investment projects. So one of the projects I've been doing recently is around investing in China and the risks and opportunities of investing in China. That's a project I've found really interesting and something I'm really, really passionate about, to be honest, because as you'll see in the news, it's an interesting topic at the moment. And I think we want our clients to be able to make the most of the opportunities of investing in China, whilst being aware of some of the risks and not prone to the biases that you may see in the media. So that's an interesting project. And because we work in a small business, I've been able to really attack that with my own passion and perspective. So that's been really good. I suppose 2 points that Jess has already mentioned as well are, and Catherine's mentioned too, are the responsible investment side of our business, which is really, really something that drives me and that I'm really passionate about. And so I've just used these 2 pictures here to demonstrate environmental, social and governance factors. So integrating those into our investment process. So that might be carbon emissions data, it might be data on workers' rights, it might be diversity of boards. There's lots of different data that you can get your hands on that you can use to integrate into your investments. And that's generally something that I'm really passionate about. And then finally, one thing I wanted to highlight from this is that being part of a small organization like Brunel, you do get to take part in initiatives you might otherwise not at large organizations. So I took part in the charity initiative, for example, where we selected a charity, we met them, we brought them to the office to present to staff, we did some fundraisers for them, and they were Clean Up Bristol Harbour. So it was a local charity that periodically cleaned up the harbour and cleaned all the plastic and rubbish out of it. So would I have been able to do that at a large organisation? I'm not so sure. Would I have felt as connected to the company's beliefs? I don't think so. So that's just another benefit, I suppose, that you get from working in a smaller organisation. Now, I'm going in now to sort of how I've got here. So my journey, I suppose, Jess has sort of come straight out of university in a fairly aligned degree in many ways, whereas I didn't do that at all, to be honest. I went to a local school. I then went to for primary school, sorry. I then went to a local secondary school. It was fairly unremarkable, to be honest. There's not much to say about it. Then I went on to Newcastle University to study English literature. So the top right picture here is a picture of St James's Park. Now Newcastle's a beautiful city. I'd recommend anyone to visit it if they can. And St James's is a great stadium too. And these three people here are three of my favourite writers. So George Orwell in the top left, Chinua Achebe in the bottom left, and Jane Austen. So that's just, I suppose, to demonstrate that by no means at this time did I think I would work in finance. And in fact, given the stigma that generally surrounds working in finance, I was probably against working in finance more than anything. So that's sort of where I came from. And a lot of the work that I did around that time, none of it really related to this industry or any industry or job sat behind a desk, to be honest. Generally in my holidays or after university, I did manual work. So the top left is a shed that I built for someone with a friend / colleague of mine. The bottom left is a outside metal chair / swing, I suppose you could call it, that I restored. And the two right-hand pictures are, I basically planted an orchard for someone. And the top right is a fairly large hole, and I had to dig 26 of those to plant this orchard. So at this point, as I said, did I think I'd work in this industry? No, I didn't, to be quite honest. However, I think, although I didn't think I'd work in this industry, some of the things that I was interested in probably pointed me towards this part of the industry, if anything. So I was very, very fortunate. I got the opportunity to volunteer in Zimbabwe, in the southern part of Zimbabwe. It's a province called Matabeleland, which has the second largest city called Bulawayo. And basically, I was working with homeless children and street children, and I was working with them, I suppose, volunteering, doing homework with them and trying to rehabilitate children and get them off the streets. Now, part of that, I then got quite inspired, started some of my own projects, and one of those was a garden project. And as you can see from some of these pictures, started a garden project, did some fundraising and raised some money so that the children at one of the children's homes I was working at could grow vegetables at their children's home, because they had a lot of land available and they spent $40 per month on vegetables for 25 children, which is by no means enough. So that was something I did, and something that definitely inspired me, and is probably why I work at Brunel today, is probably this alignment with my own interests, I suppose. But from here, in terms of work, I then went on, came back, moved to Bristol. I lived in this yellow building here. You can see in the middle, which it wasn't the nicest place to live, has to be said, but it was fairly cheap, which was what I was going for at the time. And then I started off with I was working just in a call centre, working for a company called Milk and More, basically selling dairy products and yeah, customer service effectively, working for the company. You can see in the top left, who basically sent delivery milkmen out all around the country. So that's what I did to begin with. Then I got a job at Hargreaves Lansdown, which is for those that don't know, is a financial company based in Bristol, offers lots of financial products to retail investors. And I worked on a phone there as well, in this department on the right-hand side called the Investment Help Desk. So I worked there, dealt with customers' queries, often their complaints. It was quite hard work, but I definitely learned a lot. And from there, I then got a job at Brunel, and I haven't looked back since. And if I could just end with, I suppose, why that makes sense, or how that's happened, I think Brunel occupies a place in the financial services industry, which, although I probably wouldn't have thought I'd want to do at one time, it really aligns a lot of probably my personal beliefs with an interest of mine in investing itself. So that's, although I didn't expect to be here, It's amazing. It's amazing what happens as you go through the career process. And yeah, that's all from me.
Thanks, Will. And then finally, Bethan, and then we can start answering your questions that are coming in. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Bethan, and yeah, just before I go any further, I want to apologise for my voice. Hopefully you can hear me. I've got a bit of a sore throat, so I'm a lot deeper than normal. Yeah, I'm Bethan. I'm 27 years old, and I'm from a very small town in Kent. My story is actually a little bit different to Will and Jess's in that I never really saw myself working in finance, and honestly, I'm not sure whether I see myself working in finance for the long term. So you might be wondering why I'm presenting to you today if I don't necessarily see myself in this industry. But yeah, hopefully my story will provide a little insight into that. So thinking back to school, I always excelled. I loved learning and I had a very inquisitive mind, but I never really had a particularly strong idea of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I enjoyed humanities subjects such as English and history, and creative subjects as well, like art and graphics. And honestly, if you asked me back then if I had to pick a career, probably would have been something like interior designer or architect. So without any real steer for what I wanted to do, I chose to go to university and study something that I knew I would enjoy. I studied classical civilization at Leeds University and pretty much just rested on the assumption that I would be able to get a half decent job because I had a degree. But yeah, so whilst I was at uni, I volunteered for a Samaritan-like listening service called Nightline. And it was here that I fell in love with the idea of making a career out of helping people. So I considered social care, counselling, charity work, and really even to this day, I think about how I can pursue this line of work. I graduated in 2015 and very quickly decided that I'd had enough of studying and trying to figure out how I was going to get to my dream career. And yeah, from a young age, I had a really keen interest in traveling and seeing the world and experiencing different cultures, which is probably another reason why I chose the degree that I did. But at that point, I took myself off on a 7-month adventure around Southeast Asia and Australia and New Zealand with 2 of my best friends from uni. So yeah, traveling was probably one of the best experiences of my life, really. But the reality is that I came back from that time away with no money to my name, and this is probably where my introduction into the working world of finance begins. So just a short walk away from my family home, there was a credit card company called Vanquis. I joined Vanquis in 2017 as a customer service agent. So like Will said, essentially answering customers' calls and helping them with queries to do with their credit card account. So picture a call centre with lots of headsets, and that was me. I very quickly worked my way up the ladder there and became part of a specialist team working on a project which was perhaps the biggest event to happen to the company since its inception. The project involved me branching out into so many different aspects of the company. So suddenly I was working with data protection. I was resolving complaints with the complaints team. I worked very closely with operations and change and control. So looking at processes across the whole company, really. I was analysing data. I developed a coaching program within the project that I was in to develop junior agents. And I actually progressed to a point where I was managing a team. So I learned a lot there about working in finance, and especially how working in finance doesn't necessarily mean wearing a suit and crunching numbers and, you know, that kind of the stigma that Will highlighted earlier that kind of surrounds working in finance. So you may remember at the start of the presentation that I said I come from a really small town in Kent. And despite my progression at Vanquis, and where I could have got to there. My need to experience something bigger got me to a point where I wanted just to move on. I needed to move out of my hometown and just really wanted to experience living in a city. So I decided to move to Bristol. If I'm completely honest here, this is where I think I actually wanted to use this shake up in my life, this kind of change to make that career change into a career path that would open the door to more of a social care job. But yeah, my impatience to start a new life and get to Bristol really trumped any career goals that I had at that time. So whilst I was still at home and still at Banquist, I started looking for any job that would get me to Bristol. And with plenty of experience in administrative work and lots of customer and client service experience, there were a lot of jobs to choose from. I stumbled across an advert for a 6-month contract as a client relationship and administrator for Brunel Pension Partnership, and I decided to apply. So from Catherine's introduction, you hopefully understand that Brunel is an investment company, and I applied for this job having zero understanding of investments or pensions even, and I actually told Catherine that when she interviewed me for the role, which may not have been the best thing to do. But in any case, I got the job, and I moved my entire life here to Bristol. I started working for Brunel in February 2020, so some of you may work out the maths there. It was about 3 weeks before COVID and lockdown hit the UK. So yeah, I'm sure many of you are able to relate to this in some way or another, but working from home and having just started a new job in a field I had no experience in and living in an entirely new city, I felt very much like a fish out of water. I struggled at the start. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere and was constantly asking silly questions. My day-to-day consisted of trying to muddle through client queries where the jargon alone really just confused me. I was reviewing processes that I didn't understand and looking at file structures and just kind of doing general admin for the client relations team. I did persevere, and slowly I began to learn with the help of my team and just my colleagues more generally across the company. I picked up projects that became mine and eventually developed a real interest in the work I was doing. And I think this is probably the reason why I said yes to kind of talking to you today. I'm working in a field which really doesn't make much sense when you consider my background, my interests, or my ambitions, where I see myself going. But actually I chose to stay in at Brunel when I could have declined to renew my 6-month contract. And hopefully that demonstrates that you can find something you love in any job, no matter how out of your comfort zone that you may feel to begin with. So yeah, now I'm a permanent member of the team and I work as a client relationship analyst instead, whilst supporting Brunel's chief stakeholder officer as his executive assistant, sorry. So my day-to-day now consists of confidently working through client queries rather than muddling through. I analyse data, I support in projects and really work across teams to push Brunel forward. As I said, I also work closely with our chief stakeholder officer to engage with shareholders, and I manage his time. So rather than feeling like an imposter, I'm now really embracing how much there is to learn. And the work that we're doing with responsible investment in particular is really interesting. And on a more personal level, I've developed an interest in operational work with the hope to branch out a little more into that aspect of the company. Yes, so that's my story today. Catherine, back to you.
Thanks all. You can see I'm in the office and the lights are turning off because I'm the only one here, so I'm sorry about that. But it's over to you guys now. So I can see we've had quite a lot of questions already, but do keep them coming in. I try and get through as many as possible. So the first question, and I have this as one of my backup questions in terms of what is the work-life balance and what is a typical day like for you? So perhaps Jess, I can start with you. What's your typical day like, and how do you find the hours that you work? Is it reasonable? Is it manageable for a junior member of staff?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's the idea that coming in as a junior in finance, you would be working ridiculous hours, and that's definitely not what Brunel has made me do. So it's flexible working. So to a certain extent, you can work the hours that you want, apart from the meetings that we have set in the diary with the portfolio managers. So some days that means, especially in summer when it was bright in the morning, I would wake up at 7, work all day, go for an hour's walk, maybe finish early. Or now it's winter, it's much more likely that I'm not going to wake up at 7 a.m. I start a bit later, but it does tend to still be that 8 hours a day. But when it's busy, especially around monthly monitoring, at the moment it's quarterly reporting, so it's quite busy. I'm assuming that I am working more than that, but because I enjoy the role, I find that the work-life balance is really nice because I'm usually enjoying what I'm doing, especially if I'm researching or something. I don't mind it too much. So yeah, I think it's really good.
Perhaps to sort of give a side on the client relations side, so what hours do you kind of see yourself working? What's your typical day like?
Well, it's increased recently because we've lost Catherine there to the finance team, but no, generally it's all, you know, all fairly normal. You know, we do, as you know, as Jess said, we do have flexible working, so the company's very comfortable with us working hours that suit our needs. So we've got lots of parents and, you know, lots of people that live further away, so have to factor in travel time and things like that. But generally, I'd say I'd probably work 8 till 4, 9 till 5, like give or take. There are peaks and troughs, so there's, you know, times of the month where I have a lot more to do, times of the quarter even that I have more to do, so I will stay later. Generally, we all care about the job that we do, so we want to do a good job, and if that means staying late, then we will. But as I say, flexible working policy, and I've just booked a day's leave, flexi leave, because I've stayed late a few days over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, it's all comes back around. I think we're very much treated as adults. We can manage our own time, and yeah.
Anything to add on that, Will?
No, not really. I think you've both covered it well. I think if you enjoy your job, which I think Brunel has a culture which makes it quite easy to enjoy your job, but makes a massive difference. I don't clock watch ever, whereas I have done that before in roles, and that does make an 8-hour day can seem, or 7-hour day can seem very long if you're looking at your watch all the time. Whereas if you enjoy what you do, I often work longer than, you know, my contracted hours, for example, or I might be shorter, but it doesn't really, it's more about the task and the work as opposed to the hours. And therefore, when you find a job like that, I know it may sound like you'd never find a job like that, but you can do if you're interested in something. And that's probably all I would say.
Yeah, and just to add to that, as you can tell, I'm in the office on my own now, so everyone that was in the office today has gone home. We're still very much balancing home working and office working, but I think we will going forward have a very much a hybrid approach, and be flexible to accommodate people. As I say, we're very much of the view if the work gets done, so we're outcomes driven rather than sort of time driven, that works for us as a business. So what are the other roles? What skills do you think is essential for your role? And obviously from here, our panelists, we've got people from client relations, we've got people from the investment team, and obviously people from the finance team as well. So broad range of skills, but perhaps Bethan, did you want to start first in terms of what do you see your sort of key skills to help you do your job?
Yeah, so yeah, being a client facing role, definitely communication. We need to make sure that we're speaking and communicating with our clients, getting points across, feeding their feeding what they want back to our investment team. So we're the go-between in the client relations team. So we kind of funnel information through and back out again. So yeah, definitely communication, listening, kind of all tied in with that. Time management, I think that's kind of across the board, but we get client queries and we need to make sure that we respond to our clients as efficiently as possible. Yeah, we're definitely the people in the company. We love a chat. We've got a reputation in the company, I think, the client team for being the chatty ones. So yeah, I think that's probably the key skills for us.
Jess, perhaps I can come to you in terms of the investment. Obviously, you're new to that team, but what sort of skills did you think helped you settle and that you use sort of regularly?
I think it's really hard to answer this one because, as I mentioned, there's the two different sides of the analysis. There's the reading and the researching, and then there's the numerical side. And there's a team of 10 of us, and we all have very different strengths. So I might actually hand it over to Will, because I think it's just the one if you have to enjoy your job. But I would find it really hard to answer that question, actually.
That's okay. I think the beauty of this industry and working in investments is you can have a lot of different skills. So I'm probably quite good at communicating, probably writing. Obviously, I've done a degree like that and good at processing that sort of information, whereas there's people in my team who are much better on Excel, much better with numbers, as Jess is, but that doesn't mean that they're complementary perspectives. It doesn't mean that you need to be a set way to succeed. And I know it sounds boring, but the main point is to be interested and to work hard so that you can put time in, not just in work, but maybe, in your studies. I've seen there's another question around studying, but it's in terms of putting work in outside of work, reading around the subject if you're interested. But if you are interested, then all of that's easy, if that makes sense. Like, I personally, say I might read a book on something that I'm interested in to do with responsible investment, or anything, or articles, or the things that you consume can make you better at your job and a more rounded investor or analyst, I suppose. So I wouldn't say so much there's a set way of doing things, although I suppose if I had to pick one thing, it would probably be attention to detail.
And then following on from that, Will, I wonder if you could talk about the training and career development opportunities, because I know you have undertaken some further training within the investment team. So I think one of the questions cover off training and further support.
Absolutely. So I know that's something that's really important, and I think it's really important for employers to give their, I suppose, employees the opportunity, really, because it's something we all want to improve, we want to progress. If you're interested, you want to know more about a subject, and that's something that Brunel does. It supported me through 2 sets of exams now, so I'm currently doing quite a long set of exams called the CFA, so it's to become a chartered financial analyst. So they're quite hard, as I'm finding. They take quite a lot of time, and they are quite expensive, and that is something that I know if you have to do it off your own back, you do have to consider. But Brunel is very good in terms of it supports employees in that in extracurricular activities, I suppose, and it just makes. But then it's that trust, and it sort of ties in the flexible working and the knowledge that it will benefit through giving, through empowering employees. You do then reap the benefits eventually. So yeah, it's something that Brunel actively tries to empower its employees through, to try and improve you, to make you, better at your job, not just for Brunel, but for your career beyond the company as well. So it's something that's really important, definitely.
And we do offer sort of training and development programs. Obviously, we have annual appraisals where those sort of development needs are identified, and they can come from your line manager as well as from the individual themselves. A lot of our teams have done the investment management certificate. So again, that's been sponsored by the organisation. And then we've also got in finance opportunity to study for either ACCA or CIMA qualification. So a broad breadth of training and development opportunities. So as I say, those opportunities are there for the taking, but you have to be sort of willing to sort of pursue those and follow up for them on yourself. There was another question on a mentor system, and whilst we are quite a small company, as I say, we're only 52 employees, so you do have teams, you have your line manager, but as I say, everyone is very supportive and willing to support all individuals. But certainly I know in the wider investment community there is that opportunity to have mentors, and they don't have to necessarily be within your organization or within the team you're working. So from my experience, I've had experience of being mentored, and it's good at every stage in your career, not just when you join new companies, but when you're looking to progress and get more senior as well. So certainly do take up that opportunity and pursue sort of mentors outside of your companies as well. There was some questions around graduate schemes, and whilst I know some finance companies do offer quite sort of detailed graduate programs, we are a small community, we have a very small number of people in posts, but there are always opportunities, and we do advertise on LinkedIn as well as our website for senior grade and junior positions. As Bethan said, she's taken on from this for the post she's got now with virtually very little skills in investments. So I mean, there's certainly entry points for you, as well as more experienced people to join the team. So let's have a little look what other questions we've got coming in. How do you stand out in your firm? So I guess that's quite an interesting one. So Jess, do you want to try and answer that one as a first pass, and then we can go around the team?
Yeah, that's another difficult one. Thank you, Catherine. I think it's that thing of there's so many different ways of being good in Brunel because of the fact that, yeah, for example, Bethan was saying that she needs to be really chatty, but then I guess in my role I don't have to be that chatty and friendly and confident, and there's a lot of different skills that you can have. But I think to stand out in any job, it has to be you're putting a lot of work in, and I think to put a lot of work in something, you have to enjoy it, you have to have a genuine interest. Like Will was saying about outside of work, reading books or watching movies, even just the fact that you have a genuine interest in something, it will come through the more knowledge that you have about it. So I think to stand out in any firm and to be good at your job, you do have to kind of go an extra step, which comes from enjoying it.
Will, have you got anything to add there? How do you stand out in your teams?
I would just say it's commitment, really. It's commitment to what you're doing, and I know that ties in with interest, but it's if you're committed to something and you're willing to improve, you're willing to try things you're not necessarily good at the first time in order to improve. There's a whole, I suppose, I think anyone can do that, but sometimes you don't want to. There's certain jobs where I probably wouldn't put the effort in to do that. But I think that's the main thing. And also, as I highlighted in my presentation, the beauty of being a small business is you can find a lot of outlets for whatever personality you might have, whether that's, a mentor program, initiating a grad scheme, helping out with a charity work, or helping form the culture of the organization. I think that sort of commitment and commitment beyond your station, I think that can really help you stand out at an organization. It's almost like being a team player, I suppose. And I think other people see that and they buy into it. And that would be my personal opinion.
Have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't be afraid to question the status quo. So, not to say go into a job and say everything's rubbish and everything must change, but if you kind of enter any job and you look at the way things are done, or you see things and you think maybe how about trying it this way, and question it and put your thoughts and your input into something that may have existed since we're a new company, we're fairly new, so things were kind of set up fairly quickly. And I know that when I started, I was pretty much asked to do that, to look at the way things are done and see whether, from an outsider's perspective, there's anything that could be improved upon. And actually, I think that's probably one of the things that I'm going to take away, if any future jobs, is to kind of go in with that attitude of you can improve something. So don't be afraid to question and offer suggestions, because I think that's quite a good place to start. And it will kind of set you above other new starters that just kind of go in and accept things may not need to change, but yeah, there's nothing wrong with
definitely sort of echo that. Recently, having joined a different team, be proactive, don't underestimate your value, whatever stage of your career you are at, because everyone has something to offer, and seeing something from a different perception certainly helps a better outcome. So don't be afraid to make suggestions, and certainly I know I value the other team members that are perhaps more technical than I am. I've got experience, but again, everyone has got something to give, so don't underestimate your value. I was going to sort of move on to some of the questions regarding about what experience, what would help young graduates going into a new position, perhaps. What do you wish you'd known that would help you in the world of work? So, Will, whether you want to start with that one?
I think the key thing I think my experience is probably evident that you don't need the typical internships. I think most people who have been through the industry or have worked in the industry, or any industry really, they've worked with people who are good at their jobs, they've worked with people who aren't really passionate about it and don't really care, and I think it doesn't matter. They can see through that. And I think the main thing, going back to it again, if you have in any way you can express your interest in a personal capacity, whether that's doing a course in your own time, whether that's taking up, say you were investing your own money, or to have an opinion. I remember very clearly at my interview for Brunel, I was asked, well, how would you invest your money? And I probably said something that was completely rubbish, but I had a view and it obviously mattered to me. So I think for them that meant a lot more than whatever qualifications I had, because I was not very qualified, if that makes sense. However, since then I've acquired qualifications because I'm interested. So I think that's the main thing, is if you're not interested, then it's probably not motivated to pursue it, then I wouldn't worry, because there are others who will be. And therefore, I know it's a bit of a life lesson, but it is really useful if you are interested to try and find that in a way that you can express through an interview, I suppose, and it doesn't have to be the typical way you might expect, if you like, a 3-month internship as an investment bank or an investment firm, because not everyone has those opportunities, and I certainly didn't.
Jess, is there anything you'd like to add? Because you're probably the one that's closer in time to the people watching today. Is there anything you wish you'd known?
I think it was, I was so set on, I have to go to university, I have to get a job, like a grad scheme or something, but definitely the most, I found what benefited me most was just getting experience. I had a few jobs that were quite relevant to what I wanted to do, but I also had ones that weren't, the teaching in schools, for example. But it did mean that when I went to an interview and I was talking to someone, I had more examples of skills that I could demonstrate, and also I learned the things that I was good at and what I wasn't good at, and what I enjoyed and what I didn't. So I think it was the trying to get that experience, whether it's relevant or not at the time, at some point you will learn something from it and you will be able to take something from it.
And Bethan, as you've gone into the client relations team, so does it live up to your expectation? What were your preconceptions about the industry? Have they come true, or are they very different now you're actually working in the industry?
Well, yeah, I think I said in my presentation, finance has a stigma, and it is very much London suits, crunching numbers, working ridiculous hours and all of this. And I never really thought of myself working in finance because I was always very much a people person. Maths and numbers are not my thing. My background, my kind of all of my jobs kind of growing up were customer service and working with people, and even Banquist, which working in the bank was this first step into the finance sector. It was still very much a customer client kind of service role. So yeah, bit of an odd one, but I suppose skills are transferable, and skills can be learned. So I brought a different set of skills to this role. Jess and Will may not have necessarily acquired for their roles. So and I think actually I was quite nervous about doing this tonight, and I was speaking to Will before I committed, and he made a very good point in that we could have had someone that worked in HR talking tonight, because they're still working in the finance industry, but they're working in a completely different role. So don't worry basically.
And just to add to that, I'd sort of probably say that not all investment firms are the same. So again, when you go for an interview, you're much as interviewing the company as they're interviewing for you. And it's so important to try and get that value and cultural fit right. So as I say, try to reach out to people. If you can find people on LinkedIn, reach out, make as many opportunities to have connections to really understand what a business is like, because that's important. You spend 8-9 hours a day working with people, and you've got to enjoy what you do and enjoy the values of the organization you're working for. So as I say, most people are willing to help, have those conversations, reach out to sort of people that are working there, and sort of get the true picture. We've had one question, is there anything you don't like during your job? So that's quite an interesting one. So Will, do you want us to kick off with that one? Is there anything you don't like?
Yeah, if there's one, I was just going to add one more thing on what we were talking about before, if I may, and that was just don't be scared of getting rejected. I think that's really important. I got rejected from loads of roles that I thought, oh, that's going to be perfect for me. And at the time, it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, but you get over it, and actually it's a really good experience. So I just wanted to say that, because unfortunately for people attending this call, that might happen at some point. You might find a role you really want to do, or you think on paper you really want to do, and you might not get selected. Now it's not the end of the world, and you will learn from those experiences and doing different jobs like Bethan and I have. So I just wanted to say that first. But in terms of anything I don't like, of course, there's always going to be bits of jobs that not you don't like, but you like the other bits more. I really like reading articles. I really like speaking to managers. I really like having the discussions. Do I like data entry so much, or admin, or bits? No, I don't, basically. But then there's other people in my team. I quite like talking to people and presenting. There's other people in my team who don't like that at all. So everyone's different, and I wouldn't say there's any particular downsides to my job because of the job. It's because of what I'm like, is what I'd like to say. So it's each to their own, I suppose, really.
And Jess, is there anything you don't like?
Not particularly, but I think probably what Will said is a nice way of putting it, that people enjoy different things. I find that I don't really enjoy writing up the meeting notes. When I'm actually doing them, I enjoy it, but for some reason, when I know that I have to do them, I will keep on bumping them down my to-do list. But I think that is just because I enjoy researching and like trying to research why something is going well, why something isn't going well. Maybe even the data entry. I like getting lost in doing some things with numbers. So yeah, it isn't that there's anything I don't enjoy about the job, which sounds like we're lying. But I think I genuinely enjoy all of my job.
And Bethan, is there anything you don't enjoy?
Yes. So perhaps not don't enjoy, but find particularly difficult and hard to find the joy in client relations is so broad, and it's probably the one bit of the company that you're expected to know a little about every aspect of the company, and that can be really challenging sometimes. You know, Will and Jess are in the listed markets team, and would probably be quite confident answering listed market queries, but we have loads of different teams, and client relations is kind of expected to know a little about everything, and I think sometimes it can get forgotten. we're only human and we may not know everything, so that's probably the difficult aspect of working in client relations, and yeah, can sometimes be the bit that's not very enjoyable, but at the same time it can be the best bit about the job because you get to know a little about everything, so yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, that, but yeah, probably the only thing that's difficult.
And just to give my reflections on that, I probably didn't enjoy being at home full time. So sort of going through the COVID experience. So I do quite enjoy coming into the office 1 or 2 days a week now, where we're sort of finding our new way of working. So as I say, probably with my client relations hat on, I'm a talker too, and I like to have that contact around me. So yeah, I think hybrid working will definitely help. There's a question about ESG that I thought would be good to finish before we perhaps wrap on, and where business headed in the next 5 years. So as I say in my introduction, we're owned by our clients, and our budget is set by our clients. So in a way, I suppose our clients kind of control to a certain extent where we're being led, but we are very successful in our own right for responsible investment. So we will continue as far as we can to be at the front of that industry as far as possible. We are developing new products all the time, because that's what our clients want us to do. So certainly we are leading the way there. So just to say before we finish, I hope you've enjoyed the session. I hope you've enjoyed hearing our stories. I hope it's been helpful to you. A lot of people have been asking about the recordings, and they are all available on the TSW's website after this session. So do go back to them and take a look. There's also another session tomorrow with Rachel Green and the 10,000 interns, so do please sign up for that. And don't forget, in November, I think that the TSW are all looking at competency-based questions. That's all good for getting you prepared for those interviews ahead of the next session. But as we're coming to the end, it just leaves me to say thank you very much to our panelists, so Jessica, Will and Beth, and thank you very much for your time and sharing your stories with you. It's been really interesting to sort of go on your journeys with you, and we hope to see you again next time. But take care.
Perfect. Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Bye all.
Thanks. Bye.